Program BA, Subject Psychology, Unit 3, Sensation, Attention and Perception, Semester 1, Session number 1. The topic is Sensation, Definition and Characteristics. General nature of sensation. It is a fact known to all of us that sense organ are the gateway of knowledge of the world around us. This knowledge does not come as to straight away from the object or objective reality. The stimuli are the stimulus from the object, stimulate of impeding the receptors of the concerned sense organs. Those receptors, after being stimulated, is released the neutral impulses that is called encoded informations. These neutral impulses are transmitted to the concerned part of the brain. The part of the brain which receives the neutral impulses decodes it and interprets the impulses correctly. This gives the knowledge of the object stimulating. Thus, the sense organs keep us aware of the state of affairs in our environment, be it internal or external, physical or social. The knowledge of the world around is very essential for us adjust to its effectively and efficiency. The stimulants mentioned above is anything inside or outside the body which initiate activity of some kind. The sensory stimuli are those which activate the sense organ. There are certain stimulus which fail to stimulate us and hence we will not be aware of the except through some sensitivity instrument. A stimulus which is sufficiently strong enough acts upon the receptors of the concerned organ and make them release. Neutral impulses are electrochemical waves. These neutral impulses constitute encoded information about the stimulating object. It is directed towards the brain for encoding and interpretation so that the individual become aware of it. So sensation is nothing but the encoded information about the object or the objective reality which is in the form of neutral impulses. The sensation vary in the number of intensity, extensivity and quality. There are many kinds of sensations as there are the sense organs. It was believed that there are five kinds of sensation such as visual, auditory, gustatory and olfactory and cutaneous sensation. Now it is found from investigation that there are three more sensations such as kinesthetic, statistic and organic. Each sensation has its own sense organs. Steps involved in sensation. There are four essential steps involved if stimulation is to lead off sensation. The first one is stimulus must be applied internally and externally. A stimulus is some kind of radiant, mechanical or other energy which activates the receptors of the concerned sense organs. The second step is the stimulus must stimulate certain receptor cells are now ending into activity. Usually, a receptor cell is activated only by a particular form of energy. The third step is that the neutral impulses released must travel from the receptor cells to brain to nerves. The fourth one is that activity must be aroused in the sensory areas of the brain producing conscious sensation. Each sensory activity has its own special area in the cerebrum or brain. The characteristic of sensation. The sensation, whether it is a visual or auditory or gustatory or any other form, has certain fundamental characteristic common to all. Some of them are sensation is a change brought about it by a stimulus. We may call it as stimulations. It makes us aware of certain fact either in the world outside or within us. They come in the form of air waves or light waves or heat waves, etc. The projection, the sensation seems to comes from the area of receptor stimulate. If you test a book, the sensation often seems to be in your hand, but is actually being felt by your cerebral context, and that is intent brain that feels sensation is demonstrated by patients who feel phantom pain after amputations of a limb. The other characteristics intensity. is for sensations to be effective, it must possess some amount of intensity. It should not be very fine or very intense. For example, a very fine sound may not be heard or very faint light may not be seen. On the other hand, if it is a very intense beyond certain limits, it gives rise to some other experience than it has to. Here, a weak stimulus such as a dim light will affect a small number of receptors, but a stronger stimulus such as a bright sunlight will stimulate many more receptors. When more receptors are stimulated, more impulses will arrive in the sensory area of the brain. The brain counts the impulses projects a more intense sensation. For sensations to be effective, it must possess some amount of intensity. It should not be very faint for a very intense. The other characteristic contrast the effect of a previous stimulation sensation and a current sensation which make them the exaggerated or demands. Again, this is a function of the brain which constantly compares sensation. On a very hot day, you jump into a swimming pool. The water may feel quite cold at first. The brain compares the new sensation to the previous ones, and since there is a significant difference between the two, the water will seem colder than it actually is. Adaptations becoming unaware of a continuing stimulus receptor detect changes, but if the stim also continues, it may not be much of a change. And the receptors will generate fewer impulses. The water is in the swimming pool that seems to be cold at first seem to warm after a few minutes. The other characteristic is after image, the sensation remains the consciousness even after the stimulus has stopped. A familiar example is bright after image, seen after watching a flashbulb go off. The very bright light strongly stimulates receptors in the retina, which generate many impulses that are perceived as an intense sensation that lasts that longer than the actual stimulus. Latency period. It is the time to lapses between the stimulus presented and the responses shown. The stimulus takes certain length of the time, is roughly 0.005 seconds to zero point 0.1 seconds to arouse a sense organ. Then it takes time to arouse the nerve fibers that lead to the brain. Further, the brain connections, the motor nerves and the muscles also takes time to respond. Thus, there is a bond to be lapse of time between the awareness of the sensation and consequent initiations of action. Usually, the response and the stimulus appear to take place simultaneously, but there is always some of the lapse time which is known as latency period. This can be measured by reaction time hypothesis. Exigency refers to the amount of space that the stimulus occupies. Infant many sensation will have extensivity and bigger stimulus occupies larger space and the smaller stimulus occupies smaller area. For example, a hot water bath occupies larger space in the skin and the pinprick occupies smaller spaces in the skin. High intensity of sound occupies larger area of the basilar membrane and low intensity occupies smaller areas of the basilar membrane. So next characteristic is duration. If a stimulus is to be effective, it must be presented for a certain length of a time. It should be neither too short nor too long. If it is too short, it does not act upon the sense organs effectively and produce the desired sensation. If it is too long, the concerned sense organs either gets the fatigues or there will be adaptations in the sense organs. And hence there will be no sensation and no response. For example, continuous presentations of an order are shown for a long period of false negative adaptations and will not be provoked the expected response. The last characteristic is quality. Every sensation has quality in addition to quantity. The quality tell has two kind of sensation and quantity refers to the amount of sensations. For example, two colors of the same saturations value and brightness value still differ in color. Similarly, tones of different instrument to they are equal. Intensity and the frequency of sound waves differ in their tonal quality, which are as easily distributed. Thus, sensation, whatever to be a modality they belongs to, have some common characteristics. These are the reference book we have referred for presentation. Robert Feldman 2011 and Anna L. Gilder, Richard Atkinson and Rita Introduction to Psychology 36th edition.